On October 14th, 1972, Harold Lindquist took his aluminum boat onto Lake Prosper for the last time. He'd fished that lake every autumn for 31 years. Left the cabin at 5:45 in the morning, thermos of coffee in one hand, tackle box in the other. His wife watched him walk down to the dock through the kitchen window while she made eggs. By noon, the boat was found drifting empty near Birch Point. No oars, no tackle box, no Harold. The Washburn County Sheriff's Office ruled it accidental drowning. Case closed in 9 days. Heart attack on the water, they said. Man his age, cold October morning, went over the side, but they never explained why his life jacket was still hanging on the cabin porch, or why 3 witnesses saw a second boat out there that morning. A boat nobody could identify. A boat that was never found. Carol Lindquist sat in the same kitchen where she'd watched her husband walk to the dock 23 years earlier. The wallpaper had yellowed, the linoleum had cracked, but the window looked out on the same lake, and the dock was still there, gray and weathered. Across from her sat Ruth Pelletier, regional correspondent for the Ashland Daily Press. Ruth had covered the original disappearance in '72. Now she was back, notebook open, tape recorder running.
You wrote the first story. October 16th, 1972. I still have the clipping.
I remember. Sheriff Dahl gave me 20 minutes, said it was straightforward.
You believed him.
I was 26. I believed a lot of things.
Ruth looked at the photograph on the kitchen table. Harold Lindquist, in his fishing vest, holding a walleye, grinning at the camera. The date stamp read August 1972, 2 months before he vanished. Ruth had driven up from Ashland that morning, 4 hours on county roads that hadn't improved much since Nixon was president. She'd told her editor she was working on a retrospective piece. 23 years since the Lindquist disappearance. Human interest, that wasn't why she'd come.
Mrs. Lindquist, you called my office 3 times last month. You said you had something to show me.
I found it in the shed. Harold's shed. I'd never gone through his things properly. Couldn't bring myself to. But last spring, I finally did.
Carol rose slowly from the table, her knees troubling her. She walked to the kitchen counter and opened a drawer. Inside was a manila envelope, edges soft with age.
He kept records. Harold kept records of everything. Fishing logs, weather notes, boat maintenance. But he also kept these.
She placed the envelope in front of Ruth. Inside were photographs, Polaroids, and a small spiral notebook filled with dates and times. Ruth spread the Polaroids across the table. 12 photographs, all taken from roughly the same angle. Harold's dock, the view looking north across the lake toward the state forest land. In each photograph, at varying distances, was a boat. The same boat. Dark hull, no visible registration numbers, 2 figures aboard. The dates on the Polaroid borders range from June through September of 1972.
He was documenting them.
Every time he saw that boat, he'd take a picture. Write down the time in his notebook. They always came from the north end, past the point where the old logging road used to run.
Did he tell anyone?
He told Sheriff Dahl. August of '72, 2 months before he disappeared.
Ruth looked at the notebook. Harold's handwriting was careful, precise. Dates, times, weather conditions, and one recurring note. Same boat, no markings, gone by dark.
What did Dahl say?
He said Harold was imagining things. Said there was no crime in fishing without a registration sticker.
Ruth drove into Prosper Falls before sunset. The town hadn't grown since '72. If anything, it had contracted. The sawmill had closed in '84. The bait shop was boarded up. The municipal building still had the same green metal roof, spotted now with rust. The Washburn County Sheriff's Office occupied the building's east wing. Ruth pushed through the glass door and found herself facing a counter, manned by a deputy who looked barely old enough to vote.
Help you, ma'am? I'm looking for records on a case from '72. Lindquist, Harold. Accidental drowning. 72? That's before my time. Before most everyone's time around here. Sheriff Dahl handled it originally. Is he still around?
The deputy's expression shifted. Something passed behind his eyes that Ruth recognized from decades of interviewing reluctant sources.
Sheriff Dahl passed in '89. Heart attack. Who would have his case files? You'd have to talk to the county clerk. But I can tell you right now, anything that old is probably in storage, if it exists at all.
The county clerk's office was in the basement. Ruth descended concrete stairs that smelled of mildew and old paper. The clerk was a woman in her 60s named Doris Halverson, and she remembered the Lindquist case.
Oh, that was a sad business. Harold was a good man. Bought his fishing license from my father's store every spring.
I'm trying to locate the original case file. Sheriff's report, witness statements, anything from the investigation.
Doris led Ruth through rows of metal shelving, green filing cabinets stretching back into fluorescent-lit gloom. She stopped at a section marked 1970 to 1975 and began pulling drawers.
Here we are. Lindquist, Harold. October 72.
The folder was thin, too thin. Ruth opened it and found a single typed page. Incident report. Accidental drowning. No witness statements, no photographs, no mention of the mysterious boat.
This is everything?
That's what's in the file.
There should be more. Witness interviews, the search and rescue documentation.
I can only show you what we have, Miss Pelletier. If something's not here, it was never filed. Or it was removed.
Ruth checked into the Lakeview Motor Lodge, the only motel still operating in Prosper Falls. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and pine air freshener. She spread her notes across the bedspread and began making calls. The first 3 witnesses from her original 72 article were dead. Natural causes, all of them. The 4th, a man named Gene Kowalski, who'd reported seeing the second boat, was in a nursing home in Superior. The 5th name on her list was still local. Tom Alberg. He'd been the one who found Harold's empty boat drifting near Birch Point. Ruth dialed the number from the phone book. It rang 6 times.
Hello?
Mr. Alberg? This is Ruth Pelletier from the Ashland Daily Press. I interviewed you in October of '72 about the Lindquist disappearance.
There was a long pause. Ruth could hear a television in the background, the sound of a game show.
That was a long time ago, Miss Pelletier.
I know. I'm working on a follow-up piece. I'd like to talk to you again, if you're willing.
I said everything I had to say back then.
You told me you saw a second boat that morning. A dark hull, no markings.
Another pause. The television went quiet.
I was mistaken about that. Told Sheriff Dahl the same thing a week later. Trick of the light on the water.
Tom Alberg lived in a small house on the south shore of Lake Prosper, 3 miles from where he'd found Harold Lindquist's empty boat 23 years earlier. Ruth arrived the next morning to find him waiting on the porch, coffee in hand. He was 74 now, thin and weathered, with the look of a man who'd spent his life outdoors. He didn't invite her inside.
I told you on the phone. I was wrong about the second boat.
Mr. Alberg, I have Polaroid photographs Harold Lindquist took over the summer of '72, all showing the same unregistered boat on this lake. He documented it for months.
Tom's hand tightened on his coffee mug. He looked out at the lake, not at Ruth.
Harold was getting on in years. Saw things that weren't there.
He was 58, ran his own hardware store, kept meticulous records of everything.
People believe what they want to believe.
You saw the same boat Harold photographed, the morning he disappeared. Then, a week later, you told the sheriff you were mistaken. Why?
Tom finally looked at her. His eyes were tired, and something else. Something that looked like old fear.
Because some things aren't worth remembering, Miss Pelletier. Some things are better left at the bottom of the lake.
Ruth drove to the nursing home in Superior that afternoon. 3 hours each way. But Gene Kowalski was one of only 2 living witnesses who'd reported seeing the second boat in '72. She found him in a wheelchair by a window, watching traffic pass on the street below. His mind was sharp, sharper than his body. He remembered her immediately.
You're the reporter. Young girl back then. Wrote down everything I said and it never made the paper.
The editor cut your quote, said it wasn't relevant to the accidental drowning angle.
Accidental. That's what they wanted everyone to believe.
Who's they, Mr. Kowalski?
Gene turned his wheelchair to face her. His hands were spotted with age, but his grip on the armrests was firm.
I saw that boat 3 times that summer, always at dawn or dusk, always heading north toward the state forest. And I saw it the morning Harold went missing. 2 men in it, moving fast, coming from the direction of Harold's dock.
Did you tell Sheriff Dahl this?
Told him everything. He wrote it down, nodded, thanked me for my time. Then nothing. No follow-up, no questions, like I'd never said a word.
On her way back from Superior, Ruth stopped at the Washburn County Historical Society. A converted Victorian house filled with logging equipment, old photographs, and the accumulated memory of a century. The volunteer on duty was a retired teacher named Helen Brandt. She'd lived in Prosper Falls her entire life.
I'm researching the Lindquist disappearance. October 72.
Poor Harold. Everyone liked Harold.
Do you remember anything unusual happening around that time? On the lake or in town?
Helen was quiet for a moment, organizing pamphlets on a display table.
That was the year they started the road work. The old logging road on the north end of the lake. State said they were improving access to the forest land for fire prevention.
When did that start?
Spring of '72. Went on through the fall. Lots of trucks going back and forth. We thought it was odd doing all that work on a road nobody used.
Nobody?
The logging companies pulled out in the '50s. That road hadn't seen regular traffic in 20 years. Then suddenly the state's spending money on it. Gravel, grading, culverts. My husband said it was government waste. But the work stopped right after Harold disappeared. Never finished the job.
Ruth spread a county map across her motel room bed that night. The north end of Lake Prosper bordered state forest land. The old logging road Helen mentioned ran from County Highway M through 6 miles of forest, ending at a cleared area marked on the map as former mill site. She traced the route with her finger. If a boat left from that north shore, it would pass directly in front of Harold Lindquist's cabin on its way south. Harold had photographed that boat all summer. He'd reported it to the sheriff. And then he disappeared. Ruth looked at the Polaroids again. The date stamps. June 14th, July 8th, August 2nd, August 19th, September 5th, September 22nd. She opened Harold's notebook, cross-referenced his observations with the photographs. Every sighting matched, and there was a pattern she hadn't noticed before. The boat appeared every 2 weeks, like clockwork. Harold had noted it himself, circled it in his careful handwriting. Regular schedule. What are they moving? The last entry was dated October 12th, 1972. 2 days before Harold vanished. The next morning, Ruth drove north on County Highway M. The road to the old logging area was still there, marked by a faded wooden sign reading, State Forest Access, No Winter Maintenance. The road was in better condition than she'd expected. Gravel, well graded, with drainage culverts at regular intervals. Whatever work the state had done in '72 had lasted. After 4 miles, she came to a locked gate. Chain link, 8 feet high, topped with barbed wire. A metal sign read, Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, authorized personnel only. Ruth parked and got out. Through the fence, the road continued another 100 yards before curving out of sight. The forest was dense on both sides. No buildings visible. No indication of what was being protected. She took photographs. The gate, the sign, the road disappearing into the trees. Then she noticed the tire tracks. Fresh ones, cutting through the gravel. Someone had been here, recently. On her way back to the car, she found a weathered concrete marker half buried in the undergrowth. Numbers stamped into the surface. Y. 1971. Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Not Natural Resources. Ruth called the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources from the motel phone. She was transferred 3 times before reaching someone who could answer her question.
Ma'am, I'm showing no DNR property on the north end of Lake Prosper. That's all state forest land, managed out of the regional office in Hayward.
There's a gate on the old logging road. Chain link, barbed wire. Sign says DNR authorized personnel only.
I don't know what to tell you. We don't have any facilities in that area. Never have, as far as our records show.
Ruth hung up and tried the Department of Transportation next. The concrete marker with the DOT stamp had to mean something. Another series of transfers. Another clerk who couldn't help.
1971? That would have been a road improvement project. Let me check. Yes, here it is. Washburn County, Forest Access Road 14. Contracted work. Completed October 1972.
What was the nature of the work?
Grading, drainage, surface improvement. Standard access road upgrade.
Who requested it?
That would be in the authorization file. One moment. That's odd.
What?
The authorization came from the governor's office. Direct request. That's unusual for a county forest road.
Ruth drove to the Prosper Falls Public Library. It was a small building, one room, staffed by a part-time librarian who doubled as the town's postmistress. The newspaper archives were on microfilm. Ruth scrolled through the Ashland Daily Press from 1971 and 72, looking for any mention of the road project or state activity on Lake Prosper. She found nothing about the road, but she found something else. A small article from March 1972. State acquires lakefront property. The Wisconsin Department of Administration had purchased 40 acres on the north shore of Lake Prosper from a private timber company. The purchase price was not disclosed. Ruth kept scrolling. May 72. Another article. Federal grant for northern Wisconsin conservation. The state had received $200,000 from the Department of the Interior for wildlife habitat preservation in Washburn County. She wrote down the details. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. Land purchase in March, federal money in May, road construction through the summer, and Harold Lindquist watching boats come and go from that property, documenting everything, until October. That evening, Ruth visited Carol Lindquist again. She brought copies of the newspaper articles and her notes on the road construction.
Did Harold ever mention the state buying land on the North Shore?
He knew about it. Everyone did. There was talk the state might build a campground up there, but nothing ever came of it.
The road work started that same spring. The boat Harold was photographing came from that direction.
Carol was quiet, looking at the articles spread across her kitchen table.
Harold thought they were poaching. Fish, maybe deer. That's why he documented it. Thought he could get the game warden interested.
But the boat came every 2 weeks. Same schedule. Poachers don't keep schedules like that.
No, they don't.
Mrs. Lindquist, when Harold talked to Sheriff Dahl about the boat, what exactly did Dahl say?
He said he'd look into it. Seemed interested at first. Then Harold ran into him at the hardware store a few days later, and Dahl acted like they'd never spoken. Harold said it was like the man had forgotten the whole conversation.
Or been told to forget it.
That's what Harold started to think. That's when he got scared.
Ruth couldn't sleep that night. She sat in the motel room with Harold's notebook, reading his entries for the last week of his life. October 8th. Boat again. 6:15 a.m. 2 men. Something in the bow covered with canvas. Heading north. October 10th. Talked to Ed Novak at the bait shop. Asked if he'd seen the boat. He said no, but he was lying. I could tell. October 12th. Called the DNR office in Hayward. Asked about the state property. Woman said there's no state property on Lake Prosper. I told her about the land purchase. She said she had no record of it. Then she asked for my name and address. I didn't give it. October 13th. Someone was parked outside the cabin tonight. Truck with no plates. Left when I turned on the porch light. Carol didn't see it. I didn't tell her. The last entry. October 14th, 5:30 in the morning. Going out early. If something happens to me, the photographs are in the tackle box. Tell Carol I love her. Ruth closed the notebook. Harold Lindquist knew he was in danger. He went out on the lake anyway. The bait shop Harold mentioned in his notebook was still operating. Ed's Bait and Tackle on the main road into Prosper Falls. Ruth arrived when it opened at 6 in the morning. The man behind the counter wasn't Ed. A younger man, mid-40s, with the same broad face and thinning hair.
I'm looking for Ed Novak.
My father passed in '87. I'm Dave. Can I help you?
I'm Ruth Pelletier from the Daily Press. I'm researching the Harold Lindquist disappearance.
Dave's expression didn't change, but his hand stopped arranging the lure display.
That was before my time. I was in the Army in '72.
Your father knew Harold. They talked about an unmarked boat on the lake.
My father talked to a lot of people about a lot of things. Ran this shop for 40 years.
Harold wrote in his notebook that your father lied to him, said he'd never seen the boat, when Harold knew he had.
Dave finally looked at her directly. His eyes were careful, measuring.
Miss Pelletier, my father was a good man, but he was also a careful man. He knew when to keep his mouth shut. Maybe Harold should have learned the same lesson.
Ruth pressed harder.
Your father saw something. He told Harold he hadn't, but he had. What was he afraid of?
Lady, I don't know what you think you're going to find after 23 years. Harold Lindquist fell out of his boat and drowned. Happens all the time on these lakes.
His life jacket was on the porch. His tackle box was never recovered. And the boat he spent months photographing was seen leaving the area that morning.
Says who?
2 witnesses, Gene Kowalski and Tom Alberg, both reported it to Sheriff Dahl.
Dave's jaw tightened. He turned away, busying himself with inventory that didn't need organizing.
Tom Alberg changed his story. Said he was mistaken.
A week after Harold disappeared, after talking to Sheriff Dahl.
Look, I don't know what happened out there. I wasn't here. But I know my father stopped fishing Lake Prosper after that fall. Man who'd fished it his whole life suddenly wouldn't go near it. Sold his boat the next spring. Never said why.
Maybe he saw what Harold saw.
Maybe he saw enough to know better than to talk about it.
Ruth drove back to the locked gate on the logging road. This time she parked out of sight and approached on foot through the trees. The fence extended 50 yards on either side of the gate before ending abruptly in the forest. Whoever had installed it hadn't bothered to secure the full perimeter. Ruth walked around the eastern end and followed the road from inside the tree line. After a quarter-mile, the road opened into a clearing. What she found there stopped her cold. A building. Low, concrete, windowless. Not large, maybe 40 feet by 60. Loading dock on one end, generator shed beside it. The whole site was overgrown but not abandoned. Recent tire tracks led to the loading dock. Ruth photographed everything. The building, the generator, the tire tracks. A pile of rusted 55-gallon drums behind the structure, stacked 3 high. She moved closer to the drums. Some were marked with faded stenciling. She could make out partial words. Prop. U.S. Gov. And a serial number series. This wasn't a wildlife habitat. This wasn't conservation land. This was a storage facility. Government property hidden in the Wisconsin woods, accessed by boat across a lake where a man had disappeared for asking too many questions. Ruth was photographing the drums when she heard the engine. Vehicle approaching on the logging road. Moving fast, she ran for the tree line and crouched behind a fallen birch as a green pickup truck pulled into the clearing. State plates. 2 men got out. One wore a DNR uniform. The other was in civilian clothes, older, with the bearing of someone used to giving orders.
Check the perimeter. Someone's been through the fence.
Ruth pressed herself lower. The uniformed man walked toward the fence line, flashlight in hand despite the daylight. The older man stood by the truck, scanning the trees. Ruth's camera was still in her hand. She could see the older man's face clearly now. Something about him was familiar. The set of his jaw, the way he held himself. Then she remembered the photographs in the Historical Society. A younger version of this face, standing beside Sheriff Dahl at a county fair in 1971. She didn't know his name, but she knew he'd been here in 72. And he was still here now. Ruth waited 20 minutes after the truck left before moving. Her hands were shaking as she made her way back through the forest to her car. She drove directly to the Historical Society. Helen Brandt was there, cataloging donations.
I need to see those photographs from the county fair again. 1971.
Helen brought out the album. Ruth found the photograph she remembered. Sheriff Dahl, ribbon in hand, standing beside a man in the suit. The caption read, Sheriff Arthur Dahl with State Representative Warren Gunderson at the Washburn County Fair, August 1971.
Warren Gunderson. Is he still alive?
Oh, yes. He's in his 80s now, lives in Madison. He was our representative for 22 years before he retired.
He was at the state level in 72?
Served on the Natural Resources Committee, if I recall. Very involved in conservation. Or so he said.
Ruth wrote down the name. State Representative Warren Gunderson, Natural Resources Committee. The man who would have had authority over state land purchases, federal conservation grants, access roads built at the governor's request, and he was still visiting that facility 23 years later. Ruth called her editor that evening from the motel.
I need more time up here. This story is bigger than I thought.
Bigger how? It's a 23-year-old drowning case.
It's connected to state government, a hidden facility on state land, a former representative who's still involved.
Ruth, that's a serious accusation. What do you have?
Photographs of the facility, documentation of the land purchase, road construction authorized by the governor's office, and a witness who saw Harold Lindquist's boat being approached by unidentified men the morning he disappeared.
Who's the witness?
Gene Kowalski. He's in a nursing home, but his mind is sharp. He'll go on record.
There was a long pause on the line.
Ruth, be careful. If you're right about this, you're talking about people with resources. People who've kept something quiet for over 2 decades.
They kept it quiet because nobody asked the right questions. I'm asking them now.
You've got a week. Bring me something solid, or I'm pulling you back for regular assignment.
The next morning, Ruth found a note under her motel room door. No signature. Typed on plain paper. The Lindquist case was closed for a reason. Some doors should stay shut. Ruth photographed the note, then went to the front desk. The night clerk, a teenager with acne and a bored expression, said he hadn't seen anyone.
I was watching TV most of the night. Didn't notice anybody in the lot.
You have a guest register. Who else checked in yesterday?
Just you and a couple from Illinois. They left this morning.
Ruth drove to Carol Lindquist's cabin and showed her the note.
They know you're looking.
Does this scare you?
I've been scared for 23 years, Miss Peltier. Scared of not knowing what happened to my husband. Scared of knowing. A piece of paper doesn't change anything.
I found the facility. On the state land. It's still there. Still being used.
Then someone's still protecting it.
Warren Gunderson. He was a state representative in 72. He's still involved.
Carol's face changed. Something old and bitter surfaced in her eyes.
Gunderson. Harold mentioned that name. Said he'd seen it on papers in the county assessor's office. Something about the land purchase.
The Washburn County Assessor's Office was in the same municipal building as the sheriff and the county clerk. Ruth waited until the lunch hour, when the office was staffed by a single clerk eating a sandwich at her desk.
I need to see the property records for the north shore of Lake Prosper. Parcels transferred to state ownership in 1972.
The clerk, a woman named Janet, was more helpful than Ruth expected. She pulled a thick folder from a cabinet and spread the documents across the counter.
Here we go. 43 acres. Transferred from Northern Timber Holdings to the state of Wisconsin. March 1972. Purchase price. Huh, that's odd.
What?
The purchase price is listed as $1. That's usually a gift or a tax arrangement. But there's a notation here about federal compensation.
Who signed for the state?
Warren Gunderson, State Representative, Natural Resources Committee.
Ruth photographed the documents, the transfer deed, the assessment records, and one more document she hadn't expected. A recorded easement granting the federal government perpetual access to the property, signed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
The Army. What would the Army want with lakefront property in northern Wisconsin?
Ruth made calls from the library's single payphone, out of sight of her motel room, where someone had left a threatening note. The Army Corps of Engineers office in St. Paul was polite but unhelpful. They had no record of any easement on Lake Prosper property. The document Ruth described didn't exist in their files. She called a contact at the Madison Capital-Times, a reporter named Frank Mullen, who'd covered state government for 30 years.
Warren Gunderson. Yeah, I remember him. Natural Resources Committee, late 60s through the mid-80s. Big on conservation, anti-development. Made a lot of enemies with the timber companies.
Any scandals? Anything that didn't make the papers?
Nothing that stuck. There were rumors in the 70s about federal contracts being funneled through the state. Some kind of storage arrangement. But nobody could ever prove anything.
Storage for what?
That's the thing. Nobody knew. The rumors dried up after Watergate. Everyone was too busy with Nixon to care about a state representative in Wisconsin.
Frank, I found a facility. On state land in Washburn County. Concrete building, no windows, loading dock. Government drums with Army markings. And Gunderson was there yesterday.
Ruth, be very careful. If you're right, you're not just talking about a 20-year-old cover-up. You're talking about something that's still active.
That night, Ruth drove to Tom Alberg's house on the South Shore. No lights in the windows. She knocked anyway. The door opened a crack. Tom's face appeared, older in the darkness, eyes wary.
It's late, Miss Pelletier.
I know what you saw that morning. I know why you changed your story.
I told you, I was mistaken.
You saw the boat. The same boat Harold photographed all summer. You saw it near his dock the morning he disappeared, and then someone told you to forget it.
Tom was silent for a long moment. The lake was still behind Ruth, black and cold under the October sky.
You don't know what you're doing.
I found the facility. I know about Gunderson. I know the Army Corps of Engineers has an easement on that property.
Tom's hand tightened on the doorframe.
Then you know enough to leave it alone.
A man died, Mr. Alberg. Harold Lindquist died because he saw something he wasn't supposed to see. And everyone in this town has spent 23 years pretending it didn't happen.
Harold saw boats. I saw boats. But I didn't see what happened to him. Nobody did.
Then what are you afraid of?
Tom looked past her, at the lake. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper.
The men who came to see me after Harold disappeared. They weren't from around here. They had credentials I'd never seen before. And they made it very clear what would happen if I kept talking about boats on the lake.
Ruth pushed harder.
What credentials? FBI? Military?
They didn't say FBI. The cards just had numbers. A seal I didn't recognize. They said they were from the government, and that was enough.
What did they want you to say?
That I'd been wrong about the second boat. That the light on the water had fooled me. That Harold Lindquist fell out of his boat and drowned, same as the sheriff said.
And you agreed.
My wife was pregnant. My daughter was born that December. You want to know what I was afraid of? I was afraid of men who could show up at my door at midnight and make problems disappear. I was afraid of what happens to people who don't cooperate.
Like Harold.
Tom's eyes were wet now. He wiped them with the back of his hand.
Harold was a good man. Stubborn as hell, but good. He thought if he documented everything, somebody would have to listen. He didn't understand that some people don't want the truth documented.
Do you know what they were moving? What was in those boats?
No, and I didn't want to know. That was the whole point. Don't look, don't ask, don't remember.
Ruth waited.
There's one thing. Something I never told anyone. The morning Harold disappeared, I was out early. Saw the boat, like I said. But I also saw something on the shore. North Shore, near where the state land is.
What?
A truck. Military truck. The kind with the canvas back. It was there at dawn. Gone by the time the search started.
Ruth returned to her motel room to find the door ajar. She pushed it open slowly. The room had been searched, drawers open, mattress askew, her bag dumped on the floor. But the searchers had been looking for something specific. Her camera was gone. Her notes were gone. Harold's notebook was gone. The Polaroids, however, were still in her jacket pocket. She'd kept them with her since Carol had given them to her. Ruth stood in the doorway, heart pounding. The message was clear. Someone knew what she'd found. Someone wanted it back. She gathered what remained of her belongings and drove to the only place she could think of. Carol Lindquist's cabin. Carol answered the door in her bathrobe, alarmed by the late hour and Ruth's expression.
They searched my room, took everything. My camera, my notes, Harold's notebook.
Lord have mercy. Come in, come in.
I still have the photographs, the ones Harold took. They didn't find those.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to finish what Harold started, but I need your help. I need everything you have, every scrap of paper Harold kept, every photograph, every receipt, every note.
Carol led Ruth to Harold's shed behind the cabin, the same shed where she'd found the manila envelope months earlier.
I only went through part of it. Couldn't bring myself to do more. But if there's anything else, it'll be here.
The shed was small, organized with the precision of a man who'd spent his life running a hardware store. Tools hung on pegboards. Tackle boxes lined one shelf. Fishing rods stood in a corner rack. Ruth began searching methodically. Behind the tackle boxes, she found a metal lockbox. The key was hanging on a nail above the workbench. Inside the lockbox, more photographs. Not Polaroids this time, but 35mm prints. Professional quality. Time-stamped by the photo lab. The first set showed the concrete building. Harold had found it too. He'd photographed it from the tree line, just as Ruth had. The loading dock, the generator shed, the drums. The second set showed something else. Men. Men in civilian clothes unloading crates from a military truck. The truck Tom Alberg had seen the morning Harold disappeared, and in one photograph, clear as day, a face Ruth recognized. Younger, but unmistakable. Warren Gunderson, standing beside the loading dock, directing the operation. Ruth spread the photographs across Harold's workbench. Carol stood beside her, looking at images her husband had taken a quarter-century ago. Images that had gotten him killed.
He photographed everything. The facility, the trucks, the men. He had proof of a covert operation on state land, and he documented every piece of it.
Why didn't he show me?
He was protecting you. Same reason he didn't tell you about the truck outside the cabin. He knew he was in danger, and he didn't want you involved.
Ruth looked at the photographs again. The crates being unloaded were marked with stenciled numbers. Military shipping codes. She couldn't read the full designation, but partial letters were visible. Kim and Has.
Chemical hazard markings. They were storing something dangerous out there, something the government wanted hidden.
In our lake?
The facility has a loading dock, but no road access for heavy trucks. The only way to move large shipments would be across the water. The boat Harold photographed, it wasn't poaching, it was logistics. They were moving materials to and from that facility by boat.
And Harold saw it.
He didn't just see it, he documented the whole operation. And someone found out.
Ruth drove to Madison the next morning. 5 hours through October farmland. Trees stripped bare, sky the color of dirty steel. Warren Gunderson's address was listed in the public records. A house in a quiet neighborhood near the university. The kind of house a retired state representative might own. Ruth parked across the street and waited. At 10:15, a Lincoln town car pulled into the driveway. A man in his 80s got out, moving slowly but steadily. The same face she'd seen at the facility. The same face in Harold's photographs. Ruth crossed the street and caught him at his front door.
Mr. Gunderson? Ruth Pelletier, Ashland Daily Press.
Gunderson turned. His eyes were sharp, evaluating.
I don't give interviews.
I'm not here for an interview. I'm here about Lake Prosper, about the facility on state land, about Harold Lindquist.
Gunderson's face went still. Not afraid, Ruth noted. Calculating.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I have photographs. Harold took them in '72. You're in several of them. Standing at the loading dock while men unloaded chemical containers from military trucks.
You're mistaken.
I saw you there 3 days ago. The facility is still operating, and I have 23 years of questions that need answers.
Gunderson stood at his door, one hand on the frame, blocking entry.
Miss Pelletier, you're making accusations without understanding what you're dealing with.
Then help me understand. A man died. His widow has spent 23 years not knowing why. The least you can do is tell me what was worth killing him for.
I didn't kill anyone.
You were part of it. The land purchase, the federal money, the road construction. You arranged everything, and when Harold Lindquist started documenting what was happening, he ended up dead.
Gunderson's jaw tightened. He looked past Ruth, scanning the street.
You don't know what you're involved in.
I know the Army Corps of Engineers has an easement on that property. I know you've been visiting that facility for over 2 decades. I know chemical containers with military markings were being moved across Lake Prosper in 1972. And I know Harold Lindquist was killed because he photographed it.
You have no proof of anything.
I have Harold's photographs. I have witness statements. I have property records with your signature on them. And I have a story that's going to print, whether you talk to me or not.
Gunderson was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped aside.
Come inside. If you're going to write something, you should at least understand what you're writing about.
Gunderson's living room was modest. Photographs on the walls. Awards and plaques from his years in the legislature. A career built on conservation and public service. All of it a facade.
Sit down, Miss Pelletier. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room.
I'm a reporter, Mr. Gunderson. I don't make those promises.
Then I'll speak hypothetically about things that may or may not have happened.
He settled into an armchair, suddenly looking all of his 83 years.
In the early 70s, there were concerns about certain materials, byproducts of military research, things that couldn't be disposed of through normal channels. The government needed storage sites, remote locations, places where nobody would ask questions.
And you provided one.
I facilitated a land transfer, that's all. The federal government needed a secure site in northern Wisconsin. I helped them acquire one.
Using state conservation funds.
The money came from federal sources. It was routed through the state for administrative purposes.
And when a local fisherman started photographing your operation, someone decided he needed to be silenced.
That wasn't supposed to happen. Lindquist was supposed to be warned, discouraged, not...
He stopped himself.
Not killed.
Ruth leaned forward.
What happened to Harold Lindquist?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
But you know who was?
Gunderson was silent. His hands trembled slightly on the armrests.
There were contractors, people who handled security for sensitive government operations. When Lindquist started taking photographs, when he contacted the DNR asking questions, someone flagged him.
And the contractors dealt with it.
I was told it would be handled quietly. A warning. Maybe some property damage to discourage further investigation. I never authorized anything more than that.
But something more happened.
By the time I found out, it was too late. Lindquist was gone. The sheriff had already ruled it accidental, and I was told to keep my mouth shut and let it stay that way.
Told by whom?
People who don't identify themselves. People who make problems disappear. The same people who've kept that facility operating for 23 years without a single inspection or public inquiry.
You let them kill a man and cover it up.
I didn't let them do anything. I was a state representative, not a federal operative. I signed papers, I looked the other way, but I didn't kill Harold Lindquist.
You might as well have.
Ruth stood.
Here's what I know, Mr. Gunderson. The federal government used state land to store hazardous materials. They moved those materials across a public lake using unmarked boats. A civilian documented the operation and was killed for it. And you were part of every step of that process.
You can't prove any of that.
I have Harold's photographs. I have property records. I have witness statements. I have your face in pictures taken at that facility, both in 72 and last week.
Gunderson's face had gone pale.
The story runs in 3 days. You can either give me a statement now, or you can read about yourself in the paper.
If you publish this, you'll be destroyed. Your career, your paper, everything. These people don't lose.
Maybe not. But Carol Lindquist deserves to know what happened to her husband. And the people of Washburn County deserve to know what's been sitting in their backyard for a quarter century.
You're making a mistake.
No, Mr. Gunderson, you made the mistake. 23 years ago when you decided a man's life was worth less than keeping a secret.
Ruth walked out, leaving Gunderson alone in his living room full of awards for public service. Ruth drove back to Prosper Falls through the night. She stopped once for gas and coffee, watching the rearview mirror for headlights that might be following. She arrived at Carol Lindquist's cabin at 2 a.m. Carol was waiting, unable to sleep.
Gunderson talked. Not everything, but enough. The facility was a storage site for hazardous military materials. Harold documented the operation, and when he started asking questions, government contractors killed him and made it look like an accident. Contractor, that's what Gunderson called them. People who handle problems, who make things disappear.
Carol sat at her kitchen table, the same table where Ruth had first heard about the insurance check clearing in 3 days.
So Harold didn't drown.
No, I don't think he drowned.
They killed him. Because he took photographs.
Because he wouldn't stop looking. Because he documented everything and tried to tell someone. Because he was too honest to look away.
Carol was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady.
Publish the story. Everything. His photographs, his notes, all of it. Let people know what kind of man Harold was. Let them know what these people did.
It might put you at risk.
I'm 71 years old, Miss Pelletier. I've spent 23 years in the dark. I'd rather face whatever comes in the light.
Ruth filed her story the next morning. 12 pages, photographs, documents, witness statements, everything Harold Lindquist had gathered, everything she'd discovered in 2 weeks of investigation. Her editor called within the hour.
Ruth, this is explosive. If half of what you're claiming is true...
It's all true. I have documentation for everything.
You're accusing a former state representative of involvement in a murder and a 23-year cover-up.
I'm reporting facts. Gunderson arranged the land transfer. He signed the property documents. He was photographed at the facility both in '72 and last week. He admitted to me that contractors were sent to deal with Harold Lindquist.
Did he admit they killed Lindquist?
He said it wasn't supposed to happen. He said he only authorized a warning. But he knew. And he kept quiet for 23 years.
There was a long pause on the line.
Legal wants to review everything before we publish. This could generate federal attention.
Good. Federal attention is exactly what this needs.
Ruth, be careful. You said yourself someone searched your room. Someone's been watching you.
I know. That's why I'm not stopping.
2 days later, Ruth received a call from the Wisconsin Department of Justice. An assistant attorney general named Catherine Voss wanted to meet. They met in a conference room at the DOJ building in Madison. Voss was in her 50s, gray-haired, with the careful manner of someone who'd spent decades in government.
Miss Pelletier, your editor forwarded us a copy of your article before publication. Standard procedure when state officials are named.
I'm aware.
The allegations you're making are serious. Federal involvement in a covert storage operation, state complicity in a cover-up, the potential murder of a civilian.
They're not allegations. They're documented facts.
The federal government has no comment on any facility in Washburn County. The Army Corps of Engineers denies any easement on Lake Prosper property.
I have a copy of the easement, signed and recorded.
Voss's expression didn't change.
Documents can be misinterpreted. Photographs can be taken out of context.
Harold Lindquist took those photographs weeks before he disappeared. He was documenting a government operation on state land, and when he tried to report it, he was killed.
That's a very serious accusation.
That's why I'm making it public, because 23 years of official silence haven't brought Harold Lindquist's family any answers.
The story ran on the front page of the Ashland Daily Press on October 28, 1995. Hidden facility, hidden death. The Harold Lindquist case reopened. Within a week, the story had been picked up by the Milwaukee Journal, the Chicago Tribune, and 3 national news networks. Federal investigators arrived in Washburn County. The facility on the north shore of Lake Prosper was sealed pending investigation. Warren Gunderson declined to comment through his attorney. He died of a stroke 3 months later, taking whatever he hadn't told Ruth to his grave. The investigation continued for 2 years. In the end, the federal government acknowledged the existence of the storage facility. They admitted to improper disposal procedures for legacy military materials. They denied any involvement in Harold Lindquist's death. No one was ever charged, but the official ruling on Harold's death was changed. No longer accidental drowning. The case was reclassified as death under suspicious circumstances. No body recovered. It wasn't justice. But for Carol Lindquist, it was something. After 23 years, someone had finally admitted that her husband's death wasn't an accident, that he'd seen something, that he'd been silenced. Ruth Pelletier returned to Lake Prosper once more in the spring of 1997. The ice had just melted. The birch trees were budding. Carol Lindquist met her at the dock where Harold had walked that October morning 25 years earlier. In Carol's hands was a small metal urn.
I had a memorial service. Finally. Couldn't do it before. Couldn't let go when I didn't know.
Ruth stood beside her, looking out at the lake. The water was calm. The north shore was visible in the distance. The facility now fenced and posted with federal warning signs.
They're cleaning it up, whatever was in there. Hazmat crews have been working for 6 months.
They'll be working for years. That's what happens when you bury something for 25 years instead of dealing with it.
Carol opened the urn and let the ashes drift across the water. Harold's Lake. The place he'd loved. The place he'd protected. The place that had taken him.
Thank you, Miss Pelletier, for not letting it stay buried.
Harold didn't let it stay buried. He documented everything. He tried to tell the truth. I just finished what he started.
Ruth watched the ashes settle on the water, disappearing into the lake that had kept its secrets for a quarter century. Some things stayed hidden forever, but sometimes, if someone looked hard enough, the truth came back to the surface.